Imagine a place where the greatest minds of the ancient world gathered under one roof. A place where mathematicians studied the shape of the earth, where astronomers mapped the stars, where doctors wrote about the human body, where poets, philosophers, historians, and engineers tried to collect everything humanity knew. Now imagine that almost all of it vanished. Not just one building, not just one collection of books, but centuries of memory, discoveries, and ideas. For more than 2,000 years, the Library of Alexandria has haunted human imagination. People often say it burned in a single night. They imagine a great fire rising over Egypt, swallowing hundreds of thousands of scrolls and erasing the greatest library ever built. But the real story is more mysterious. Because the Library of Alexandria may not have died in one dramatic disaster, it may have disappeared slowly, piece by piece, scroll by scroll, generation by generation. This is the story of the Lost Library of Alexandria. Our story begins after the death of Alexander the Great. Alexander had conquered a massive empire, stretching from Greece to Egypt and deep into Asia. But when he died in 323 BC, his empire was divided among his generals. One of those generals was Ptolemy. Ptolemy took control of Egypt and founded a new dynasty. He understood something that many rulers ignored. Power did not come only from armies. It also came from knowledge. Alexandria was already a special city. It stood on the Mediterranean coast, connected to trade routes from Africa, Europe, and Asia. Ships arrived carrying grain, spices, gold, glass, papyrus, and rare goods from distant lands. But Ptolemy wanted more than wealth. He wanted Alexandria to become the intellectual capital of the world. To do that, he needed a place unlike anything history had seen before. So the rulers of Egypt began building a great center of learning. This was not just a library in the modern sense. It was part of a larger institution called the Mouseion. The word means the shrine of the Muses. The Muses were Greek goddesses of art, poetry, history, music, and knowledge. The Mouseion was like a university, a research institute, a museum, and a library combined. Scholars from across the known world were invited to live there. Some were given salaries. Some received free food. Some were provided with housing. Their job was not to farm, fight, or serve in government. Their job was to think, to read, to debate, to observe, to write, to preserve what humanity had already learned, and then push beyond it. Inside Alexandria, scholars studied mathematics, medicine, engineering, astronomy, geography, literature, philosophy, and history. This was one of the first places where knowledge became an organized project. It was not enough to collect books. The goal was to understand the universe. Some of the most brilliant minds of the ancient world were connected to Alexandria. Euclid, the father of geometry, worked in Alexandria. His book Elements became one of the most influential mathematical works ever written. Eratosthenes, another scholar, calculated the circumference of the earth with astonishing accuracy. He did it by comparing shadows in different Egyptian cities. That single experiment showed the power of observation, logic, and mathematics. Other scholars studied the stars. Some tried to understand the movement of planets. Doctors examined anatomy and recorded medical knowledge. Poets edited and preserved the works of Homer. Historians collected stories of kingdoms, wars, rulers, and civilizations. For a time, Alexandria became the closest thing the ancient world had to the internet, a place where knowledge from different cultures could meet. But the library did not grow by chance. The Ptolemaic kings were obsessed with collecting texts. They wanted every important written work in existence. Ancient stories say that ships entering Alexandria's harbor were searched for scrolls. If officials found books, they took them to be copied by professional scribes. In some versions of the story, the originals were kept in the library, and copies were returned to the owners. Whether this happened exactly as described is debated, but it shows how powerful the legend of Alexandria became. The rulers did not simply want a large collection. They wanted the collection. Works from Greece, Egypt, Persia, India, and other regions were gathered, copied, translated, and studied. The library may have contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Some estimates say 200,000. Others say 500,000, or even more. The exact number is impossible to know. But even the lower estimates are astonishing for the ancient world. Every scroll had to be copied by hand. Every text had to be stored, protected, and preserved. And yet, the greater the collection became, the more fragile it became. Because knowledge on papyrus does not last forever. Scrolls decay. Ink fades. Fire destroys. Water ruins. War scatters. And without people constantly copying old texts onto new material, even the greatest library can slowly disappear. The most famous disaster came in 48 BC. At that time, Julius Caesar was in Egypt. He became involved in a civil conflict in Alexandria. During the fighting, Caesar ordered ships in the harbor to be set on fire. The flames spread through parts of the city. Some ancient writers later claimed that scrolls stored near the harbor were destroyed. Over time, this became one of history's most famous stories. Caesar burned the Library of Alexandria. But the truth is not so simple. Many historians today believe that Caesar's fire may have destroyed books or warehouses near the docks. It may have damaged part of the collection. But it probably did not destroy the entire library. Why? Because Alexandria continued to be a center of learning after Caesar. Scholars still worked there. Texts were still studied. The city did not suddenly become silent. This means the library's death was likely not a single event. It was a long decline. A slow disappearance. After the Ptolemies, Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. Alexandria remained important, but its political position changed. Royal support weakened. Wars and unrest damaged the city. Funding for scholars became less reliable. The old system that had built the library began to fade. A library like Alexandria needed constant protection. It needed money, scribes, scholars, peace, and rulers who believed that preserving knowledge mattered. When those things disappeared, the library could not survive in the same way. There were also religious and cultural changes. The ancient world transformed over many centuries. Greek pagan institutions declined. Christianity rose in the Roman Empire. Temples and older centers of learning lost influence. The Mouseion gradually disappeared from historical records. By the time later writers spoke about Alexandria, the great institution had already become more memory than reality. This is what makes Alexandria so haunting. There was no clear final moment. No single sentence in history saying, "On this day, the library ended." Instead, there are fragments, rumors, conflicting accounts, silences. The library faded into darkness so gradually that even its death became a mystery. And what was lost? That is the question that makes the story painful. We do not know. Ancient writers mention thousands of works that no longer exist. Lost plays, lost histories, lost scientific treatises, lost maps, lost poems, lost medical texts, lost observations of the stars. Some of those works may have been ordinary, but some may have been extraordinary. Maybe there were scientific ideas, histories, inventions, and philosophies that could have changed the way people saw the world. The tragedy is not only that the library disappeared. The tragedy is that we cannot measure it. We cannot read the books to know what we lost. We can only feel the empty space they left behind. Yet Alexandria's dream did not vanish completely. Its spirit survived. Later scholars in the Islamic world preserved and translated many Greek texts. Medieval monasteries copied manuscripts across Europe. Universities continued the idea that knowledge should be collected, studied, and passed on. Modern libraries, archives, museums, and digital databases all carry a piece of Alexandria's legacy. Every time we preserve a book or protect a piece of history, we continue the mission that began then. The Library of Alexandria is more than a lost building. It is a warning for us. Knowledge can take centuries to build, but it can disappear through neglect. Civilizations are not remembered only by monuments, armies, or kings. They are remembered by the ideas they protect. Perhaps Alexandria was never destroyed in one great fire. Perhaps it vanished because too many people, over too many generations, failed to save it. And that may be the most important lesson of all. Human memory is fragile. It survives only when someone chooses to preserve it. So the Lost Library of Alexandria is not just a mystery from the ancient world. It is a question for every generation. What knowledge are we protecting? What stories are we saving? And what will the future remember about us?